Pariyatti Audiobooks presents Chapter 1, The Dharma of an Aerospace Engineer, from Journey of Insight Meditation by Lerner, as read by Jonathan Nelson.
Chapter 1, The Dharma of an Aerospace Engineer. About a dozen of us sat cross-legged in a darkened living room in a Massachusetts country home, attentive to the speech of a man whom all present, including myself, would agree was a highly unlikely candidate for a meditation teacher. His name was Robert Hover, and he was an aerospace engineer from Los Angeles. He had the incongruity of a centaur. The bottom part of him looked right, seated comfortably on a cushion, wrapped in a Burmese-style lungi, a cloth cylinder tied at the waist. Above that, though, was a 1950s-style short-sleeved sport shirt and a prominent, clean-shaven face and balding head with a fringe of gray hair cut as close as possible. He didn't radiate beatitude, only practicality. He reminded me of my junior high school football coach. Something about his sparkling eyes, though, the slight hint of otherworldliness, reassured me. As he spoke, his small body loomed much larger in the room, the strong lines on his face appearing like the flexings of muscles of his mind. He spoke about experience, not philosophy or faith or religion. He had nothing to say about God or rituals or getting high. He taught a method, he said, Vipassana, or insight meditation, a way to see into things as we have never seen them before, a way to know phenomena directly. I quickly realized that for all my drug experiences, Eastern wanderings, and Sanskrit studies, I really knew nothing about meditation, and only a little more about Buddha's teachings. I come to you with the truth of suffering and the surcease therefrom. Hover was paraphrasing the words spoken by the Buddha 2,500 years ago, but the words came not from his lips, but from within him. All is suffering. This was the Buddha's first pronouncement, the first of the Four Noble Truths that describe reality as he came to know it. This whole world we've looked upon with so much desire is only suffering. To be born, to grow old, to become ill, to die, it is all suffering. I chafed under the accusation, rummaging about for exceptions to his sweeping damnation. The eerie, harsh way Hover said the word suffering dissociated it from all my prior connotations. And when he pronounced the original Buddhist term for it, dukkha, it rang like a curse. Dis-ease, unsatisfactoriness, discontentedness, he intoned. Wait a minute, I thought. That's not true. I've been happy. Specific instances even came to mind. And, Hover added, as if he'd heard me, if you didn't, even just for a minute, think that this was the case, then you wouldn't be here looking for a way out. My mind stopped in mid-objection. He had pointed his finger at the restless impulse of my life that had always accompanied me like a shadow, the ever-present need to be somewhere else, to do something else, to feel some other way than the way I felt. Now, it seemed he was holding out some promise of an end to that. I sat up straight, attentive, all ready to begin to change. He talked about desire and craving and the ignorance of our mind that creates our suffering. My cross-legged posture degenerated into a sleepy sprawl. It was late, and his words slapped abstractly against my mind. My frustration grew. More words. He wasn't going to show me how to get to that state, that place. He wasn't going to show me what to do. Only more tantalizing descriptions like those that years before had lured me into the confusion of hallucinogens. I felt foolish now, anticipating that I would spend the next 10 days spiritually posturing, trying to act as if I didn't crave, didn't want, didn't suffer. Then he spoke about nirvana, peace, freedom, more metaphors, the end of craving, more ways I should try to be, I was now desperately tired and hugely disappointed. After a long silence, he said, "Let us begin now." Then he paused. It took everyone a moment to figure out what was going on. Sit in any cross-legged posture that is comfortable. It's of no great importance. We begin by developing concentration, the ability to place the attention on a single point and hold it there. To do this, we undertake Anapana meditation, the mindfulness of respiration. We watch the breath. Don't try to control it, alter it, or regulate it. This isn't Hindu yoga. Only watch the breath. Place the attention on the nostrils, where the breath comes in and out of the body, and note the entire in-breath and the entire out-breath, and be mindful of the distinction between the two. Don't become hypnotized by it. Stay aware of what is happening. Don't follow the breath into the body or out in the air. Stay at that one point where you can feel it striking the nostrils. When the mind wanders off, when you start thinking or daydreaming, just bring the attention back to the nostrils. Now, we'll try it for a few minutes. Try what? Try thinking about this man hover. Think he can teach me anything? No, there. The breath. Watch one in, watch one out. Feel the little follicles within the nose, he had said. It would have been easier if this woman beside me hadn't been breathing so loud. I wondered whose friend she was. Maybe she was from Cambridge. Christ, I was supposed to be watching my breath, and I was thinking about her instead of my breath. After half an hour, I'd thought of many things, particularly how difficult it was to keep my attention on a single object without it sneaking off into the ozone of fantasy, dreams, and old songs. Then Hover called a halt, and we all relaxed as he outlined the daily schedule. It included 10 hours of sitting. Meditation began at 4:30 a.m., with breakfast at 6 and lunch at 11, and only tea and fruit at 5 until the next day's breakfast. At certain times, we would all meet in the large room for group meditation and an hour-long discourse that he would deliver each evening. Otherwise, we would practice alone at our individual places. No reading, no writing, little talking. No phone calls, no letters, and no leaving the grounds, an area Hover said was now sanctified for the practice of meditation. There were no questions, and we were dismissed. For 3 days, I waged war with my mind. But when Hover described the process as putting a ring through the nose of a bull, the metaphors of combat, struggle, and progress made the operation totally familiar. I was operating within the framework of my entire life. Here is what you want. Here are the obstacles. Here is how to eliminate them. This is what indicates your progress. In-breath, out-breath. In-breath, out-breath. Great pleasure at watching 7 in a row. Fury at the thought of my wife. Not at her. At me for thinking of her. A savage blow squashed the image. In-breath, out-breath. In-breath. Great calm. And then its description. How wonderful it was. How I would explain it to Hover. You ass! This time I couldn't even remember whether the last one was an in or an out. How much time did I waste on that thought? Who was I fighting with? Somehow, though, this crude struggle worked. Longer and longer spans of attention to the breath alone developed. Finally, I became attentive enough to feel the thoughts just as they arose, and then even to anticipate them. I aborted them mercilessly, smiled at my prowess, and was dumbstruck when the brunt of my own assault hit me squarely between the eyes. The sensation was like having my mind run through a garlic press. Every thought I cut off got compacted and squeezed into the point I was watching at the end of my nose. I felt as if I was walking around carrying a time bomb. An imminent sense of terror, disaster gripped me right at the back of my neck with cold, damp fingers. I couldn't hear the thoughts because I was fixed on my breath, but I felt them like deathly whispers in the shadows. It created a strange paranoia. On the third day, I told Hover I was ready to leave. It wasn't that I thought his method ineffective. I just wanted to get the hell out of there. I felt that I couldn't last 5 minutes more as a captive audience to the unraveling of my mind. "What is it?" he asked, with a little smile that seemed to me a pretty inappropriate response to my predicament. He sat on the floor almost directly across from me. It was difficult not to look straight at his crystal blue eyes. I found my jaw pawing the air for a description. It was totally unfamiliar. Fantasy, sexual desire, the words didn't come close. Screaming want, steaming hands, desolate loneliness. Even the feelings themselves weren't the description. The shape of my mind, bent so far from recognition by the pressure of doing this, was unbearable. I didn't know me. I was afraid of me. I wanted to be in a warm bed with my wife, where at least pain and conflict were expressible. This state of formless terror was too much. "You're doing just fine," Hover beamed, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. "Things don't really get started in this process until you're ready to leave." He had just kicked down the wall I'd been beating my head against and reduced me to a rare state of speechlessness. I sat up straighter. I wanted to understand. He wasn't telling me that my anxiety didn't exist or that I should ignore it. He was telling me to look right at it in a whole new way. My descriptions had released a wave of sympathetic understanding in him that I could feel. He didn't have to say, "I know." I could look right at him and almost see his own terror all around him, but not in his eyes. They stayed calm and powerful and determined. He could look right at me, at my darkness, and at his own. He hadn't banished that darkness. Somehow, he was making his way within it. Now I half understood, but not really, because no one had ever mentioned this possibility before, that the fear, the loneliness, the desire are me, not some strange invaders to run from. As I was ready to do, as I'd always been ready to do. Welcome to right here. That's what Hover was laughing about. It was the punchline to the joke. I suddenly couldn't remember who it was who wanted to leave. Hover didn't bother to ask. His absolute confidence was infectious. I was a little frightened. I was clearly following him now, and he wasn't telling me where I was going. But I trusted him. A complete confidence in another being that I'd never known before. Because he had nothing whatsoever to hide, and he trusted me enough to reveal that fact. The next day, as we sat facing each other on the floor of his quarters, Hover said to me, "We are about to undertake the second stage, insight or Vipassana. Concentration," he said, "is merely a tool, developed to a certain point, then utilized. Buddhist meditation, unlike other systems, does not have its goal the development of concentration on a single object that produces absorptive trance states. Instead, one maintains a highly alert, specific type of critical, non-intellectual awareness, which develops panya, wisdom. This is the first-hand experience of the nature of reality. There are many objects of meditation for accomplishing this," Hover concluded, "but the most efficient," and he emphasized the word, "is what is closest at hand, this corporeal body." "Are you ready?" he asked rhetorically. Fortunately, the implications of making a choice at this juncture were clearly beyond me. I began meditating on my breath. I indicated with a slight nod. when my mind had calmed down and I was concentrating on my breath. "Okay," he said. "Now take your attention, let go of the breath, and become aware of the place at the very top of your head." I was so flustered by hearing his voice and trying to remain concentrated that I didn't understand the instructions. He repeated them, and the next thing I was aware of was a tingling feeling at a small point at the top of my head. He asked if I had done it. This was even more confusing. I didn't want to nod because I thought I'd shake loose that fascinating little sensation. So I spoke, even though I was sure that would blow the whole thing. "Yes," I answered, and heard a voice from far away. I was still aware of the tingling. I had no idea what it was. It wasn't like an itching of my skin. It wasn't even really tactile. It was a new mode of awareness, the sensation of my body. Fortunately, I didn't try to reason out the mechanics of the phenomenon. Hover continued to give instructions, matter-of-factly directing my attention systematically over my entire body, down to the toes, and then back to the head to start again. He never told me what to be aware of, just to remain aware of whatever sensations I encountered anywhere. Heat or cold, numbness, itching, pain or stiffness, tingling or rippling, or nothing at all. I had no idea what this had to do with nirvana, but what I was experiencing so occupied my attention that the question wasn't worth asking. Going deeper and deeper, I peeled back the layers of my body, this solid, familiar apparatus I had always assumed was me. The next day, I sat in my own room, intently following the instructions, moving my awareness along my body. Suddenly, the surface seemed to break, and then I was inside my body as if plunged into an ocean. Fascinated, I began exploring, feeling organs and canals, traveling up my spine, and actually touching the spongy matter of my brain, and then sliding deftly out through my ear. It was after this experience that the pain began. For 3 sessions a day, we all sat together in the big room under instructions to try to maintain a single sitting posture without breaking it for an hour. This was the maximum determination hour, or the vow. It intensified the concentration and uncovered the pain. Knee pains, aching back, numbness and burning in my legs, pins and needles in my buttocks, and stiffness in my neck. We were told to go to the spot of pain and explore it, concentrate on it, get inside of it. I couldn't believe what I found. Knots in my body that seemed to have little relation to bones, muscles, or any other physical system. And if I closely examined a particular knot, I could often trace long tails and tendrils of it going through my body. The technique now was to remove these knots by applying intense concentration to them. But what were these knots? They were the results of past actions, of lifetimes of actions rooted in ignorance, Hover explained. Lifetimes? I stared at him. Everything had seemed so reasonable and practical. Now we were dabbling in reincarnation. It would have been easier to accept the notion from the mouth of a loinclothed Swami than from this aerospace engineer. Whenever Hover said anything, it had a matter-of-factness that ruled out mythopoetics. He had an unsettling way during his evening talks of shifting gears, from reasoned descriptions of the procedure to what seemed like mystical cosmology. He talked a lot about planes of existence, realms of sub- and superhuman beings into which one was reborn according to the karma produced in this and past lives. It wasn't really transmigration. He never talked of a soul or even body that went beyond. Yet, clearly, he did not consider this lifetime the total arena of this battle. I let the issue go. I had enough problems comprehending my experiences. On the 6th morning, I was struggling with a knot the size of a grapefruit in my neck. The pain at that point was too great to ignore, so I went to it, focused on it, and found it sitting right in my spine. The pain intensified when I narrowed my attention to it, and I felt a little like I was being hanged. Meekly, I retreated, but wherever else in my body that I went, all I could feel was the knot in my neck. So I returned to it and concentrated harder and harder, leaning every bit of attention I could muster on that single, solid, unyielding spot. I had an amazing perception of pushing the pain. I could almost feel it like an enormous boulder I was trying to roll up a hill. My entire body felt as if it was straining against a huge weight, yet I was sitting immobile. An ocean of energy was being expended, but I had no idea from where to where. After all, this knot in my neck was me. What was I trying to do to me? The pain silenced the questions. The effort only increased the intensity of the sensation until I was sure it could not continue without my head snapping off. This seemed like a real possibility. For a moment, I was terrified, then dispirited. Then the pain shot up more degrees than I thought I could stand. Cornered, I fought back in self-defense, flailing ineffectually. Then I suddenly let out a war cry in my mind and leaped on it, into it, through it. And it was gone. The knot had vanished. In fact, my entire spine was gone. Dizzy from the exertion, I carefully ran my attention down where the chain of bones used to be. All I could feel was a sensation of formless matter, like a plastic bag filled with jello. My entire body was otherwise empty of its former contents. It felt quite pleasant, and not a little otherworldly. I thought I'd attained something, so I immediately got up to ask my teacher what it was. Outside Hover's door, 3 other students were waiting in line to see him, all of them wearing expressions of pained bewilderment. I wanted to whisper, "Isn't meditation great?" But no one seemed in the mood to talk. I waited for a while, and the line didn't move, which was frustrating because I knew that what I had to say to Hover was important. Returning to my room, I sat down again, and got up periodically to peek. But after half an hour, only one of the 3 had gone in to see him. So I determined to sit for a while, and get back to that lovely, floating space to make sure that I could remember the details of it to report to Hover. I got comfortable, closed my eyes, and I couldn't sit still. My mind seemed full of exploding popcorn, and my knees were on fire. After half an hour, I'd visited every country I'd ever traveled to, changed the set of my legs half a dozen times, and was ready to scream. What could I tell Hover? My body was full of nothing. An hour ago, back in my room, I lay down flat on my back and breathed deeply. All I wanted to do was watch the sensations in my body. That's what Hover had told us to do, and it was interesting. Yet something kept getting in the way. My mind. Not just as a distraction. It was more violent than that. The mind's voice could push or pull my attention in any direction, no matter what I tried to do. I'd been riding its roller coaster for days now. Intense, supreme joy and excitement, followed by the most numbing depression of my life. And each state had seemed positively like the end of the road. Despair and elation. Of course, it was no different than my life had ever been, only sharper, clearer, faster. Stripped of the ability to act out my reactions to the emotions and the mind states, I could only be aware of them and suffer them. It was pain. Even the joy became painful because I knew that the crash was imminent. My entire mind was a huge headache. I felt exhausted and confused. I hadn't slept in nights, beset by the most horrible dreams of my life. In them, a good friend felt I'd cheated him out of some money. I was in a dark room at the top of a narrow staircase that suddenly creaked hee-haw noises under the weight of many feet. My friend was with 2 others. I stood in the hallway for a minute and felt their hatred rising up at me. I saw a knife in someone's hand, and the absolute terror of dying took control of my actions. I rummaged frantically through drawers until I found a big, sharp butcher's cleaver and struck out with it, splitting a skull, then pushing another man over the banister, and finally hacking the last, my friend, until he was dead. What did it mean? Nothing, only clinging, Hover said, calmly smiling at me as if I'd just related a dream about a walk in the woods. You've come face to face with the most basic attachment there is, to your own life, and you've seen the violence it can inspire. I couldn't even look at him. I felt totally miserable. We're here to end clinging. To end it, though, we have to uncover it. That's what this process is all about. Uncovering and facing just who you are.
Pariyatti, a nonprofit 501c3 organization, offers a wide variety of books, eBooks, videos, and audiobooks about the teachings of the Buddha, the Pāli language, and Vipassana meditation. Browse our complete catalog at www.pariyatti.org.